too. We are going to start with announcements. And we'll start with Ms. Froh. No announcements. Mr. Hayes.
None.
Mr. Pinkston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the opportunity to join the students and faculty of Glengarry Elementary yesterday morning, April 22nd, to celebrate their amazing academic progress. The Education Consumers Foundation this week recognized several of our schools for their significant student growth gains. This is something that Ms. Spearman talked about at the last meeting. Glengarry Elementary in District 7 had the second highest growth in Middle Tennessee. Talk about a bunch of kids who were fired up and understand the good work that they're doing. So congratulations to Principal Lori Smith and her team. They're really making enormous progress. Thank you.
Ms. Shepherd.
Just a couple of quick ones. The McGavock High School Spring Choral will kick off this week. It will be held Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at the auditorium at McGavock High School. These shows are always really great. The choral department is under the direction of Mr. Mitch Fuller, and you need to get there early if you're planning on going because the shows are very popular and they're well attended. And I will be also at Thursday afternoon at Stanford Montessori when they receive their Education Consumer Foundation Award.
Ms. Kim. Ms. Berry.
Yes, I have several. Thank you. On May 4th, Mayor Carl Dean and the Tennessee Titans will offer the mayor's second annual field day designated for families and individuals of diverse fitness levels. Participants will be engaged in a relaxed tournament, and it will be around kid-friendly ways to be active, and that's from 9 to noon, and you can get tickets online. I want to send kudos to Linda Lentz, the founder and dean of Liberty Collegiate Academy with 5th and 6th graders. I visited there last week, and I was most impressed with those students that are completely on task. Rather than the students changing classes, the teachers change classes. So they really value time on task. The instruction was exciting. Teachers' examples related to students' interest, background, and knowledge. And to Linda and her staff, I say keep up the good work. I want to give a shout out to Hunters Lane, Dr. Susan Kessler. We had the VIP tour last week, and to our viewing audience, I would like to say that if you live in District 3 and have not seen Hunters Lane, I invite you to go and make an arrangement with the principal for a tour. 78% of the 2012 graduating class was accepted into their colleges of choice and were awarded $4.5 million in scholarships. The number of students who dropped out in 2012 decreased to just 3.9%, and Hunters Lane had the most improved graduation rate of all high schools in the city. The number of discipline incidents has steadily increased by 73% over the last 4 years. So congratulations to Dr. Kessler. We've been talking a lot on this board about how to bring up student achievement, and Dr. Kessler uses Analyze Ed, which is an ACT preparation. I know it's also used at Hillsborough High School. And they send the answer sheets from the ACT test to New Jersey for analysis for $12 a child, and that's paid through a grant. And Analyze Ed produces a study sheet, and that study sheet is given to each student, and this book is given to each student. And the students can look at specific areas where they were weak, look it up in this book, and have additional examples to study. There's also a CD in the back for additional practice tests. So again, I'm very impressed with the way, this is a wonderful way to bring up our ACT achievement test. And another thing that Dr. Kessler is doing is thinking about money and effective strategies. She has hired 2 part-time teachers, or actually 2 part-time retired teachers that help support the new teachers. And also one serves as a classroom management mentor. And this year, she has not lost any of her first-year teachers, and that is where we lose a lot of our teachers. So, again, congratulations to Dr. Kessler. The Teacher of the Year banquet is scheduled for May the 7th at 6:30 at Martin, and I know many of you will be there. Also, congratulations to Ron Woodard, who's just been named the Principal of the Year at Maplewood High School. Dr. Woodard will also be recognized on April 30th at the YMCA Black Achievers Banquet at Vanderbilt University, along with a group of 137 young achievers. And you can contact the YMCA for more information on that. Dr. Woodard attended Hillsborough High School. He earned his BS degree in science at UT Chattanooga. He got his doctorate from Lipscomb University. He taught 7th grade science for 4 years before moving to administration, where he served as assistant principal at Whites Creek, Apollo Middle, and Maplewood High School before he became the executive principal at Maplewood, and he's been there since 2011. Maplewood has been actively involved in supporting the community through various activities such as adult education, community health, economic development, and my favorite, literacy. Ron has helped organize such events as community movie night, health fairs, community gardens and a rain garden, East Nashville Neighborhood Music Festival, monthly business and community partnership luncheons, which I have attended one of those, job training and transition fairs. So you can see that Dr. Woodard knows how to bring the community together, and I would just like to, for all of us to congratulate Dr. Woodard. Thank you.
Dr. Brandon? Okay, and I will be very quick, and we will go ahead and get started. I would just like to send a thank you, and pardon me, I've been a little under the weather, so my voice is a little ratty. Thank you to Ms. Johnson, Executive Principal at Paragon Mills, and Mr. Tillis and Ms. Cobb, who are the Assistant Principals at Paragon Mills. Last week, I had the absolute fantastic opportunity to visit them on TCAP Lab Night. And for anyone who doesn't know what TCAP labs are, every year they put together a lab to have the kids practice their TCAPs. The twist here is that every student that's in attendance, they have it over the course of, I think it's 3 or 4 weeks. Every time they come, they have to come with parents. Their parents have to attend. And I walked into the school, and they have various classrooms set up, and everywhere you go, there's a parent on, whether it's an iPad or whether it's a computer, the student is teaching the parent about TCAPs, and they're going through together and answering questions about TCAPs. So it was really a great experience. The night that I went, which was on the 18th, it was pajama night. So all of the teachers, even the teachers who were the pre-K and kindergarten teachers, were there to support, and they were all dressed in pajamas, and I felt a little awkward because I wasn't. But they were all dressed in pajamas, and as a reward to the students who came every night, every time they walked in, and they signed in, there was a bell that rang to represent that they were celebrating every night coming to that TCAP lab with their parents. So literally, I was there for about an hour. The bell rang so many times, I think I still hear the bell. They had such a great attendance, and it has in turn increased the TCAP scores overall for that school. So I think it's an absolutely fantastic program, and they've done it for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. So I just wanted to say thank you to Paragon Mills for inviting me out, and I've really had a great time with them. So thank you all for your announcements. And without further ado, we'll go ahead into our discussion. We'll start with budget update. Dr. Register, Mr. Pinkston, you are on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Register, Mr. Henson and I met with the mayor's budget team this morning. This was a follow-up to our budget hearing with the mayor on April 12th. Very cordial discussion, lots of conversation about
different aspects of the proposed increase. The bottom line is we were informed that there is not going to be as much flexible new revenue in metro government in the upcoming fiscal year as everyone would have liked there to be. Not us, not the mayor and his team. We're all going to need to rethink our approach. So for the purposes of MNPS, we need to go back to the drawing board and reduce our request, our proposed request, by about half, was the headline that came out of that meeting. The funding expectations at this point are about $9 million in anticipated state BEP increase that was not originally acknowledged in our earlier proposal. Also about $10 million that will be available to us from our fund balance. So everyone on both ends are still looking at different scenarios, but for our purpose, Dr. Register and Mr. Henson are rethinking the overall approach and are going to bring back some recommended adjustments. Dr. Register, any additional context there?
We're working with staff now, and Mr. Henson may have some comments too. Of course, it's too early to talk about recommendations for that, but we're going through the budget and looking at existing programs and services, and as well as those additions that we've added to the budget to try to get closer to what we anticipate is about a 50% reduction overall in our requested increase, which is about $20 or $25 million. Chris, you have anything to say? Anything to add to that?
What kind of deadline are we looking at?
Well, the mayor will make his recommendation to Metro Council next week. And then Metro Council will have its budget hearing with us, I believe, on May 30th. Is that correct? The right date? Mm-hmm. So you know, there's not an urgency. We don't have to take action this week. But when you're looking at a modification to the budget to that extent, you know, we've got weeks of work ahead of us, and we'll develop as a staff some recommendations to you, and then bring some recommendations to you and give you an opportunity to look at that before we have to actually finalize the budget. Our budget will not have to be finalized prior to July 1st. Is that correct? I mean, well, whatever Metro Council sets will be the amount of next year's budget in the final analysis. So that'll come sometime in June, and then we'll have to finalize our budget so that it balances by July 1st.
Okay, and my next question obviously is, our next business meeting is going to be on May 14th. Are we going to, is it possible to have any revisions by that time, or is that too soon?
I think we need to think about what makes sense to us, how to react, because I don't think we ought to finalize those recommendations. We ought to come up with a concrete list until we know what the budget's going to be. Mm-hmm. And so Metro Council will meet. I think we're looking at a June timeline on mm-hmm. that. Now, if we wait till June to make these decisions, that's too late. Mm-hmm. You know, we have to be. It has to be a working process between staff and communication with the board between now and then, and we'll be doing that over. Actually, we've already started with the staff and are meeting tomorrow and other times to really go through the budget and look at what our recommendation to you will be. Mm-hmm. We will make a recommendation to you.
Okay. All right, if you'll just keep the board apprised of where we are on this, because I'm looking at the calendar. We have a work session meeting just prior to that May 30th timeline that we have set for the Metro Council budget hearing. So, you know, not to say we need to get everything done right now, but we need to really be mindful of the timeline that we are looking at here. So, great, thank you.
So their timeline on approval is, in case I rambled around with that, is the mayor makes a recommendation to Metro Council, and Metro Council does our hearing May 30th. And Christy, you know the timeline when they will adopt the final budget. The Metro Council makes the final adoption.
It'll be the latter part of June.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it has to be prior to July 1st, and then we we can, as we did last year, if needed, operate on a continuation budget and have final budget approval in July, as we did last year, once we know what the final number is going to be, if it's different from what we're working, the number that we're working with.
I think it's safe to say we'll probably have to have at least a couple more budget committee meetings before we get everything finally squared away and presented to the full board.
Okay, great.
Can I ask, just to gain perspective, so last year we had an increase, we requested, or we had a budget increase of how much? Just to remind me. Do y'all know offhand?
It was around 48 million with an increase last year.
And we're requesting 40, how much?
40,
And we've
almost
cut that
44
by
million this
half,
year.
so it's going to be quite a bit less than last year.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's still an increase over the existing budget, whatever the number ends up coming in, but it's a reduced request is, best way to think about it.
Any other questions? Fantastic. I think, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Register. Did you have a question? Okay.
I think maybe the other thing to say is we do anticipate capital budget. We don't anticipate $185 million, which was our capital request, but we're also, the board's already approved a capital request, and that's been presented to the mayor and council, and we do expect an increase in capital budget, and but less than the amount that we've requested, and we'll have to come back and prioritize that. And so we're actually working with the mayor's office and Rich Riebling now to look at the list and to the list of projects there, and inform any recommendations, final recommendations the mayor would make. Capital budget is different. Metro Council has line item approval. They approve the projects that go into that from this point on. Chris, did I say that correctly?
The mayor recommends to the council
Yep.
specific projects, and the council approves those.
So we'll expect to see something coming on capital in short order.
Perfect. Thank you. Legislative update. Mr. Clay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the board, and Dr. Register. Happy end of the session to you. I am coming today to update you on a few items that you've been following throughout the session. Ms. Hawkins should have handed out a one-pager that looks like that, and so we'll just go down the list. The first bill to remind you about is the voucher legislation. As you know, that got caught up in some wrangling and did not pass this session. The second bill is a bill that you were following closely last time. This is the bill sponsored by Senator Stacey Campfield that connected welfare TANF payments to the grades of the students. That bill did not pass, and it was something that you followed, I think, very closely, and were pleased about the results of that. The third one on the list is House Bill 6. This is the bill that would allow for school resource officers, that would allow for teachers who have gone through extensive training to be able to carry guns on campuses. The reason that this bill was better than others proposed was because that it was the one that allowed the director of schools to be able to make a decision about whether he or she would allow those teachers to be able to carry guns on campuses. That bill has been sent to the governor for his signature. I expect, because it's a compromise, that he'll sign it. But again, Dr. Register would have the decision on that particular legislation. The fourth on the list is House Bill 315. This is known as the Charter Omnibus Bill that represented a broad compromise between all the stakeholders. You might have seen it in the news because it was somewhat controversial at the last moment in the Senate. They added a provision that would allow for-profit charter companies to operate charter schools. That provision, through some negotiations, came off during the the conference committee between the House and the Senate. And so this legislation was passed and represents a good compromise and things that we're pushing for. And then the final bill that we have been talking a good bit about during this session was the House Bill 702, the state level charter appeals panel. There was a good bit in the news about this. It was held up in the Senate and was reverted back to a process that went through the state board. On the final day of the session Friday, it ended up failing completely. It is still on notice and could come up next year, but it did not pass this session.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments? Ms. Spearing?
I'm thinking about this schools resource officer bill, and I have never been in favor of guns on school property, or certainly teachers carrying weapons in our classrooms. And I know that I'm wondering how this affects us at this point. I certainly think the implications for publishing a list of which teachers are carrying weapons and which schools have weapons, it's not beneficial, and it certainly could have some negative effects. But what's the plan?
Ms. Spear, two things. First, the most simple answer is that Dr. Register has a decision, and he stated in the last board meeting that he is go ahead making a decision that he will not allow teachers to carry.
I'd rather speak for myself, honey. I am opposed to any person carrying a weapon on campus other than an active law enforcement officer, a school resource officer, or a policeman. I think it's inappropriate and dangerous for other people to have weapons on school campuses.
Thank you, Dr. Register.
And that'll be my position.
You did a good job with that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And yes, and you know what, and I would like to say thank you so much, and everybody on this board ought to give my hand, because we put you through the test. And we do appreciate it very much, Hank. Thank you so much. All right, we will now move into the reason we're here tonight. 2013 charter application process and timeline. Mr. Coverstone, Ms. Swan, you have the floor.
Can you help me with moving the slides? Thank you. I appreciate being with you here tonight. We've been through this a couple of different ways, but now we have some live applications moving through the process. So I will do my best just to move quickly through where we've been, where we are, and where we're headed, and give you a thumbnail sketch of what we know so far about the work that's going on in reviewing the applications, which are currently with the review teams. I thought I would do that in the context of the recent release of NACSA's Index of Essential Practices survey for 2012. This is something they do on an annual basis. They've derived 12 essential practices that high-quality authorizers, they believe high-quality authorizers engage in. These are derived from the principles and standards that we've been through a couple of different times. And these are the things that we use to gauge our work, to look for areas for improvement and kind of build a cycle of continuous improvement year to year. These are also things that our PMRC grant, which is coming to an end now, have enabled us to really shore up. And I'm pleased to report that we are rating as engaging in 11 of these practices. One practice is not permissible by state law, which I will talk about in a minute, so that makes it a perfect score for us given the constraints of our state law. In general, we have strong authorizers. In Tennessee, those that are engaged in these practices include the Memphis City Schools to the tune of 9 of these characteristics, and the Achievement School District to the tune of 10. And I think when we've had discussions about authorizers in recent days and weeks, that these are the things that determine and describe what effective and high-quality authorizers do. And I would always hope that we would stick to that in terms of a quality discussion, less so than the who does it or where it's done or when it's done. These would be the measures that I would want you to judge us on. And so I thought I'd just go through it in this order tonight. These are those essential practices. Sign a contract with each school. That's what gives you the clarity of performance management. Have established documented criteria for the evaluation of charter schools, which of course we do and which we're walking through again this evening.
publish application timelines and materials related to informing and letting applicants know when things are expected and what is expected, interview all charter applicants, and that's one we were able to add this year because we didn't have the time to interview everybody under the 60-day timeline, but you recall this year we now have a 90-day timeline, which gives us ample opportunity to interview all the candidates, which added that one essential practice for us this year, and I think will really enrich our evaluation of the materials as well. We'll also be able to engage in a second round of interviews and a round of public comment, and I'll remind you when those things are as we go through. Use expert panels that include external members to review applications. We are doing that and have done that, and Carol is particularly to be congratulated in her ability to recruit people to serve in this role. She is better than anyone I know at recruiting volunteers to give their time and their expertise to the quality agenda that we're after with these schools. Grant charters with 5-year terms only. That is the one that is prohibited by state law because, of course, our terms have to be 10 years. We continue to believe, as national best practice continues to suggest, that a 5-year term makes a lot more sense so that you have an automatic renewal process at some point. It is also kind of best practice to then, following those 5 years, grant some conditionally different lengths, but that would require legislative action focused on changing that process. Number 7 is to require and examine annual independent financial audits for schools, which we do and which are connected to our financial framework, have established renewal criteria, which we do and which have improved greatly as a result of our new ability to articulate academic performance as well as operational and financial performance using our academic performance framework. As we move to renewal, that will give schools an idea of where they stand and where they head into the renewal process, and will communicate clearly what their chances are. Likewise, have established revocation criteria, which we do, but which are also similarly going to be able to be expanded in important ways as our academic performance framework comes online. Provide an annual report to each school on its performance, and I'll show you a mock-up of what we're going to be able to provide to schools on that today. Have staff assigned to authorizing within the organization, that's us, and have a published and available mission for quality authorizing, which is really the mission of the district schools, mission for excellence and diversity, which we've talked about more than once. Very quickly on performance contracting, our academic performance plus our operational performance plus our financial performance plus the diversity policy that you've put in place will be the basis, the sole basis for our performance contracting when it comes to charter schools. And we'll be able to report on very clear bases where each school stands on that. You'll start to see those reports as the summer rolls on for the schools that we currently have, and that'll become a regular fall cycle for you as we go forward. So we're really looking forward to that. By articulating those things in the contract, we give ourselves a legal footing to evaluate the contract and to invoke some of the causes for revocation, or in particular non-renewal, that come with underperforming charters or charters that are neglectful in any of those areas. Established and documented criteria are now pretty widely available. We have a good relationship with Rich Haglund and the State Department of Charter Schools. We work together on publication of the annual application and evaluation rubrics, which are linked both there and to our website. We publish a charter review policy and charter guidance, which is updated on an annual basis and takes into account any evolving needs that we articulate. And of course, we have our formal charter schools policy, which details all that at SBO 106. I want to click on the little I there, please, Carol. In case you're not aware, this is a link directly to our webpage, in particular the section on charter schools. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see several areas of news and announcement. These are places where the applications that have been submitted this year and are currently under review are online. If you're inclined to read them, you can, or anyone in the viewing audience is inclined to read them, you are able to do that. We also have information about the charter review teams and the work that they're doing, as well as the, what does that say at the bottom? As well as a synopsis of the, I need a new prescription, let's just be honest. Has nothing to do with age. That's a synopsis of the people who've applied this year with a quick sort of at-a-glance table for you to kind of keep track of what grades they've applied for and the rest if you need that as a resource. Some resources on the right. If you go to the middle to start a charter school, We have further resources that are more directly targeted at those who are making application. On the left, you saw Enroll. That's for families and parents interested in charter schools to get information about the schools that we offer. And Operate is really for ongoing information and resources that we post to keep our ongoing charter school operators informed. But those links at the bottom will take you to the bulk of those materials. And I just wanted to make sure that we called that out loud so that people would know where to go if they have questions. And we're always open to suggestions about other things that can be linked there. Appreciate a great deal the communications office and their responsiveness in helping us to get things added to that on a relatively short basis. So let us know if there's something that you'd like to see there, and we'll try to get it there. With regard to publishing an application timeline, I'll start with this slide, which is what has come before. So our cycle really began as early as January 31st. I think we reported earlier that we had 10 letters of intent received. One of those was formally withdrawn in February, and when the April 1st application deadline came around, another one of those letters just didn't produce an application with no explanation. So we received 8 applications originally, and on April 2nd, we conducted a review for completeness, and 2 of the applications just simply didn't do the right application, didn't complete the documentation, didn't do what they needed to do in order to be evaluated, and so we, in consultation with the state office, sent those back, sent them their $500 deposit back as well, so that we weren't taking their money for something that was clearly not capable of being approved in the first place. That was the appropriate procedure, which is detailed in our policy, and that left us with 6. And so that's where we are at this point. I do think I should make note that this is the first year that we've been able to charge an application fee by state law. This will help us to defray only slightly some of the time that the people who are serving on the review committees are giving. We'll be able to feed them a little bit. We'll be able to give them a small bit of to say thank you for the time that they spend. They'll spend countless hours. It's by no means a reward for their work, but it's better than nothing, and it certainly is a nice gesture. And I think it had an effect on people's seriousness in terms of completing the application process, and has helped to give us really some pretty substantial and serious applications, which has improved our work because each of our teams is now able to focus really on 2. We have 3 full teams. We actually, I told you Carol was great at volunteers. She had 4 full teams worth of people ready to go based on the letters of intent, but we were able to let some people go and reorganize those teams to get down to 3 teams reviewing 2 applications each, and we think that's just an incredible ratio. Dr. Brannon can speak to the days when we, I think, each reviewed 2 applications as individuals or something along those lines. This is a much more robust process with a very diverse set of opinions on the teams, a very diverse set of experiences on the teams. I sat in on one of the meetings, one of the preliminary kind of discussions that they have going today as they're doing the paper review. And the depth of conversation is great. The perspectives expressed and the analysis in place is very worthwhile, and I think will give us some good recommendations. As far as going forward is concerned, from April 4th until the present, as I mentioned, these meetings are going on. The individual teams will work individually to review against the scoring rubrics, but then come together to discuss their findings and dig deeper into issues that they'd like to consider. They'll be beginning to build their interview protocols at this point, the questions that they want to know more about. They'll begin to be identifying their concerns and also strengths in the application. Some of those meetings occur here. Carol sits in on most of those meetings, but those are meetings that are led by the team leads, and they're the ones who are driving that process. On May 7th, we'll conduct interviews for all 6 of the applicants. These will be held at the Martin Center. You're welcome to attend, and we'll continue to let you know about that as we go forward. But that will be the time for the teams to question the applicants, not for members of the public or us to question the applicants. It'll be their process that they're engaged in at that point, but it's a public process that anybody is certainly welcome and encouraged to be a part of. On May 14th, we have scheduled for there to be time at your meeting for public comment on any or all of the charter applications. That sort of happened in a de facto way in the past, but with our elongated schedule and Ms. Hawkins' help, I think we've been able to identify a time when we can do that. And so we'll look forward to making that available and letting people know that if they have something that they want to say about any of these, that'd be a good time for them to do it. And that will, of course, inform the process. There will then be further deliberation deliberation by the committees, culminating in a second round of interviews. Perhaps the second round will not involve all of the applicants. That will depend on how those applications are proceeding through the committee process and whether they feel they need or want to hear more from them in a second interview. But there's time for second interviews on May the 28th, and we will, sometime following May the 28th, be able to move recommendations to you once we hear back from the committees, so that you'll be able to act by June 25th, which gets us in under the 90 days time limit and allows you to take your first actions. I want to say a word about resubmission for a couple of reasons. Following that initial board action, obviously some perhaps will be approved, and that will be the end of the road for them. They'll move into the contracting phase. Others will be denied at that point, but there's been a misunderstanding about what happens at the end of that first round. The action taken at the end of the first round is not a denial of the application. Last year, the board in the first round acted to deny at that first round both the KIP application and the Purpose Prep application. Both of those applications were able to resubmit to address the issues that had been identified in the board's concerns and to eventually earn approval during the cycle for approval. A little historical note, when we first started this, it was not at all customary to recommend approval of any charter applications at that first stage, partly because of the condensed timeline that we had. They were all denied. In fact, that was the officially recognized position of the state, that we should just deny them all and then sort of use that extra time to clarify and to fine-tune those that might be worthy of approval. And so all were approved on the second line. I think that's not necessary for applications of the quality that we sometimes see now. I think it's fine to just go ahead and do that. I think they're in good shape. But for those that have some issues, have further concerns, need some things worked out, it's also appropriate for that resubmission period to be used for that. What it's not appropriate to use that for is a complete rewrite or a starting from scratch or a beginning to try to figure out how to kind of game the system to get through. And I think there's a real difference there, and we'll just try to make sure that we identify what we think those differences are and let you feedback and see what you think too, because this is an interactive process whereby ultimately you make a decision on whether or not to approve the school. Resubmission this year is also a longer period. It used to be 15 days this year. It's now 30 days, and so there'll be substantial time to interact with anybody who is sent back for further work and to see if there's a way to get them through, and if that's the desire of the board, then the action on that would be on August the 27th. So we're considerably longer in our timeline to deal with the applications this year, and I think that's giving us, it feels like it's really given us a chance to dig deeper. As far as interviews are concerned, I'm not saying a whole lot about this. The first round of interviews may address gaps, but it's really about assessing capacity, clarifying any uncertainties, making sure we understand what the application is about, but more letting us get to know the teams, the leadership, and the organization. And so there'll be a number of fundamental questions addressed. How does the proposed education program work? What's its track record? Where has it been applied previously? What's the theory behind it and the thinking? What's the research behind it? What's the experience of the leadership team? What's the organizational capacity of the organization? How does the board expect to interact with the school? Does the board understand what it means to be a startup school board or a school board that is not just sort of an oversight board, but is also really an operational board and beginning to organize and create the procedures and policies for the organization as a whole? Those are the kinds of questions that we really try to dig into. Some of it is, hypothetical. How do you respond to certain circumstances? How's the organization problem solve? How does it act? And some of it is more technical and specific and related to the applications themselves. If there's a second interview, it'll really be a deep dive, probably around some more specific issues that have arisen or concerns or thoughts that have arisen. It will definitely push further to try to learn about the organization and how it works, so contingencies and scenarios that they might have to deal with would certainly be fair game in asking questions. But it's basically just a time for questioning any lingering uncertainties. All right, as far as the next characteristic of essential authorizing, use expert panels. I mentioned we have 3 teams with experienced team leads, 14 to 17 members on each of those teams, so quite a wide breadth of perspective. They represent diverse groups from inside various specialty departments at MNPS, as well as charter school organizations, local businesses, financial and nonprofit leaders in the city. So you'll find that on all of the teams. They inform our data collection and recommendations evaluations. They draw on their practical and professional experiences, both inside and outside the charter school sector, in order to produce their analysis of the applications that we look at. Grant charters with 5-year terms. I've already made the legislative appeal to have 5-year terms, but we are required by law to have 10-year terms. Require and or examine annual independent financial audits. I think that's important to understand. We do require that, and when we have had sluggishness or people who are slow in that area, it raises concerns, and we have cited them for those concerns, and we stay on that. We now have a financial performance framework that relates to the standard accounting forms for an annual audit that enables us to run some standard accounting formulas that identify potential red flags for shortage of liquid cash and other aspects of their financial structure and performance that could allow us to raise some concerns perhaps ahead of time, get their responses ahead of time, and we hope to alert them to potentially looming concerns that might prevent a school from getting through to the end of the year. These audits come in January, really. December, January is about what it takes for them to close out their fiscal year and go through the audit, and these audits are conducted by independent financial auditing firms, mostly here in town. Have established renewal criteria. I've already mentioned these are connected to the performance framework, the academic, operational, and financial. Have established revocation criteria, and I just wanted to pause for a second on this one. The Tennessee charter school law does provide for revocation of charters based on a series of specific items. The first is priority school status. That is identified in TCA 4913-122A3. The next identification of the priority schools list will be for the fall of 2015. Of course, the previous identification was for the fall of 2012, which is the priority school status that this board acted on with regard to the Smithson-Craighead Middle School action. Charters may also be revoked for or non-renewed for material violations of the conditions, standards, or procedures in the charter. These include, but are not limited to, academic underperformance, which can be defined outside of the priority school status according to our academic performance framework. We have not articulated the standards for where those thresholds are yet, but will by the time we get to the fall and by the time that becomes fully operational. Likewise, operational performance issues, including threats to health and safety, which we follow up on and investigate, and when sufficiently threatening and sufficiently concerning, we bring to you for action. But even short of that, we try to keep you abreast of what's going on as far as individual schools that have concerns in those areas. And then finally, fiscal mismanagement, including fraud or misappropriation of funds. And if that's significant enough, revocation is allowed mid-year, although if it is mismanagement that is not flagrant disregard of the charter or not flagrant abuse, but simply mismanagement, it could result in revocation and take effect at the end of the year. Obviously, all of the record of all of this is maintained. Carol does a great job of keeping track of, running down, notifying, and following up on reporting related to any of these issues. They all become part of the school's record and will be part of what you consider when a school comes up for renewal. As far as an annual report for each school on its performance, this is very tiny because I don't want you to read anything into it. It doesn't have accurate numbers on it. It is a mock-up, but we will shortly have a one-page form just like the one that's on the screen here for each of our charter schools. It will report on set demographic information. It will identify the year of opening, the number of students, the grades served, some of that basic information that we'd like to have. It will also report on the annual academic performance measures, organizational performance, financial performance, and diversity framework measures that we have. Because we have all those measures, we'll be able to report those all out on an annual basis, on a by-school basis for everyone to look at. At the top, we will be reporting where the school is based on that year's review in those categories as far as whether it is on track to renewal, whether it's perhaps on track to renewal but with some concerns, or whether it's not on track to renewal. This is something that is increasingly talked about as being required more specifically in state law. I think it's a good idea to communicate with schools as you go along about where they are, and so we'll be able to make those reports on an annual basis. Like I said, I think this year's will actually be available within the next month or two, God willing, and then it'll be an annual report that you'll have available and the schools will have available to you by the time, September or October of each year once we have the data in from the annual testing cycle. have staff assigned to authorizing within the organization. This is the staff. There she is, right over there. And I can't, I try to say it all I can, but I can't say enough about Carol's keeping up with and monitoring what is now, will soon be 19 schools, and it's a significant undertaking on her part. Of course, there are plenty of people around here who help her out, who she can get in touch with, and who can help to provide kind of answers, service, advice, information that's needed. But just the oversight function alone that she manages without the application review cycle process is really a significant undertaking, and she does a great job. I get to talk to kids. Have a published and available mission for quality authorizing. We've always said the mission for quality authorizing here is the mission for the schools in the district. And so for me and for us, and Lesson, until you tell us otherwise, our goal is to make sure that our contributions with regard to recommendations to you for approval of charter schools, our recommendations on closures, our recommendations across the board are always going to be aimed at what we think, what our best judgment is about the degree to which those organizations are able to contribute to the mission for excellence and diversity in the school district. And we'll continue to do that unless you change our mission. We want to be clear about that. We want to be simple and straightforward about that. This is not about one group of people trying to show other groups of people up. This is about building high-quality schools and creating great opportunities for all of our students, and we have to make sure that that's the mission that we keep first and foremost in our mind, and certainly is what is behind anything we suggest to you. All right, with regard to the 6 applicants we're looking at very quickly, and then I'll be quiet and take any questions. Our first application is from Explore Community School. The sponsor here is the Martha O'Brien Center. Martha O'Brien Center currently operates East End Prep, which is a very successful so far elementary school that operates in the Dalewood building in East Nashville. This school would that school is a K through 5. This one would be a K through 8, so it has a slightly different model. Its theme is identified as a college preparatory theme and emphasizing the cultural heritage of the Maplewood and Stratford clusters. They plan to open in year 1 with 172 students, and I believe that's 2 grades. It's probably a K and pre-K. And then at the K through 8 level, they would serve about 996 students through that. That's their plan. Their leader is possibly John Driscoll. We're not certain if that's the actually identified leader. That's the one who's the contact person who's on the lead at the moment. But if he is not the leader, then of course that will be part of the process as well, figuring out who and how the leader will be selected. And if he is the leader, we'll be learning more about him as we go through the process as well and how he would construct his team. The second school that's proposed is KIPP Nashville College Preparatory Elementary. Of course, this is another of the KIPP schools. They've identified their leader as Kristen Weens, college prep KIPP curriculum in East Nashville. This would be their first foray into elementary school. So this would be a K through 4, opening with 96 and culminating with a full enrollment of 480 across the five grades. This school is also proposing to open in 2015. Of course, this is the cycle for 2014, so they're asking for their charter and then to defer a year in order to open. This has something to do with their facilities development plans, but of course we'll be analyzing that in greater depth too to make sure that we think that's the best approach for the organization and that it will have the capacity to serve. And anytime that happens, the charter starts running when it's granted, and so the 10 years starts running this, next fall if we grant the charter this year, and they would simply have 9 left when they actually open. They've deferred a couple of years with their high school application in that same way, so the charter term is declining, and they get started when they have the capacity to do so. The Nashville Academy of Computer Science is a spin-off. I think the official term is replication. It's a spin-off in a sitcom. This is no sitcom. This is a very serious activity. It is a replication of the Nashville Prep School, which is one of the stronger of our currently operating charter schools. The leader has not been specifically identified, although Ravi Gupta is the leader of the organization and will clearly be directly involved in that and continue to be directly involved in that as they move from their current site to McCann with their first school. This school will have somewhat more of an emphasis on computer programming as a theme to the school, but otherwise employ the same model that they have in place at Nashville Prep, which Mr. Pinkston is very familiar with and talks about, often in terms of double math, double language, and real focus on time on task data, monitoring, et cetera. This would be another grade 5 through 8 school, and it would begin with 110 and plan to enroll 440 when it was full. Rocket Ship is a school organization founded by John Danner, who taught for a little while in Nashville, Tennessee, and then moved to California to found the organization. It is an organization that's gotten a lot of attention for its results, but also because of its unique use of learning labs and blended instruction, its creative staffing, approaches to staffing and distribution of teachers and roles. They are continuing to develop that model, and they've made application to come to Nashville. Their identified leader for this application is Adam Nadeau, who spent some time at KIPP Nashville as well, and is pretty well regarded. So this is a traditional and blended school that is aiming either to locate in North Nashville or in South Nashville, and we've talked with them about either of those locations. This is a grade K through 5 model. All the Rocket Ship schools are K through 5 and make extensive use of instructional technology, and they open all at once. 600 students is the size of the school. They open with 600 and they stay at 600. So that's the model that financially they use, and they have a number of schools open now. So it's a little bit different than the kind of schools we've looked at in the past, and so we'll obviously learn something about their capacity and how they staff it at that level and how they develop leaders within their organization, and they do have some things about their organization that are creative in those regards, and so looking forward to having an interview with them. The Thurgood Marshall School of Career Development is sponsored by the W.E.B. Du Bois Consortium of Charter Schools Incorporated. The school leader is not identified, but this is the organization headed by Dr. Willie Harrington. They have a number of schools that have been approved for operation in Memphis. This particular school is a narrowly focused school aimed at serving high school students who've had some contact with the juvenile justice system. And so we're just digging into the ins and outs of that. It would be a countywide school enrolling students from 9th through 12th grade and serving 200 students at the beginning, middle, and end. That's the full capacity that he plans to operate for this school. Finally, Valor Collegiate Academy is headed by Todd Dixon, who is a senior fellow, I don't know. He's involved with the Tennessee Charter School Incubator. He has been brought to Tennessee by them to develop some schools, and this is the first of his schools. It's a 5 through 12. He is the founder and operator of Summit Prep Schools in California, which, if you saw Waiting for Superman, was one of the schools that was emphasized there. It's a school that's built on the concepts of college preparatory curriculum, with diverse populations, and he's aiming to locate in South or Southeast Nashville, at least at the moment, and we'll develop more information about that as we go along. As I said, it's a grades 5 through 12 school, and it starts with 140 and aims to be 740 at full capacity. So those are the 6. That's where we are at this point. I'm happy to entertain questions about the specifics, but it's pretty early in the process, and other people who are poring over that day and night have a lot more insight about it at this point than I do as well. That will develop as we go through the summer. Carol, I'm sure, can give some other feedback in regard to that and the process, but I hope that gives you an overview that you wanted.
Okay, let me start with, before we start getting any other questions, let's get an overview from you, if you will, of what the board's role is in approving or denying applications once they're presented to us, from your perspective.
Yeah, this is a contract between you and the charter school to meet a need that you have in the district. And so our goal is, according to that mission and according to these practices, to give you the best take that we have, the best recommendations that we have from the evidence that our committee members are able to collect, that we're able to collect from the application, that we glean from the interviews and so on, and to provide that recommendation to you. But it is your ultimate decision with regard to that recommendation and how you decide to move forward.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize for For board members who were not here during the last application process, Dr. Gentry made a very valid point when we started to look at applications, and I've thought about that ever since she's made that point from the first time I joined the board. We spent an awful lot of time picking apart the recommendations for denial of applications and very little time looking at talking about the applications that were suggested for approval. So what I would say to you is be very mindful when going forward in this process. If there is, let's just be equal about how we approach this. If we're looking at the application, let's look at the applications for everything that, equally, for everything that is presented to us. If the recommendation is for denial, we give those as much attention as we do those that were recommended for approval. That way we know that we're accomplishing our goals. So having said that, I'd like to say just one other thing. Keep in mind the timelines. And if you could, Mr. Coverstone, can we get a copy of that PowerPoint?
Yes, I finished late this afternoon with those profiles, but I sent it to Ms. Hawkins and she can send it.
That'd be great. And if you would mark your calendars for those timelines that were discussed so that we are aware that you keep those in mind. And you said the interview process on May 7th is open to the public, but it is strictly for the review committee to ask the interview questions, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a fairly condensed amount of time that they have with the group. I wouldn't say it's strict in that sense, but yeah, we're trying to guard the time so that they can move through the questions that they have.
I just wanted to be sure that we were clear on that. So, okay, I will open the floor to any questions anyone has. Ms. Shepherd.
I'll be first. So on May 7th, when the interviews are conducted, typically, how many people from your office, for instance, are on the interview committee, and how many people do the applicants bring with them for that purpose?
Well, it varies how many they bring. It's usually 4 to 6. I'm being told that we actually ask them to bring 4 to 6. That's about what usually happens. From our office, it's really probably just Carol. I'm in and out. I've got a number of different things going on scheduled at the same time. I try to make an appearance and hear a little bit about it, but we're relying on the committee to kind of evaluate and give us their take on all of that. So I'm not intervening in that. Neither is Carol. She's just there to help with the procedures.
So it's the committee who's going to be evaluating that particular application that's there, okay?
Yeah.
And then anybody else can attend if we're so inclined.
Right.
Okay. The revocation slide that you had up there, and so that criteria that you spelled out on that particular slide, that is in writing to each charter school applicant, prior to and after.
Which, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I don't know which.
You had a lot of detail around the revocation of a charter school application, or of a charter school.
Revocation.
Right.
Right.
So, and that was a lot of detailed information. So that information is relayed to these applicants prior to, they're being approved, and after they're approved as well, correct?
Yeah, the revocation information, and I just took that out of the state law. We also have a closure guide, which is available on the website, and there's more detail about how we move through that's available there. And yeah, that information is easily available.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Hayes?
The annual report seems pretty exciting. Does it correlate to anything that we're doing across all of our schools?
Yes, it uses the academic framework that we're applying to everybody.
I guess the follow-up is, would we have that, will that document be posted on a MNPS website for every school across the district?
The short answer is no. It also has operations and financial metrics that we don't apply to all the schools in the district, so it's got a little bit different formula to it. What will be available is that academic measure. Yes, absolutely. That'll be available on all of our schools. This has a little bit different format just because of the nature of the schools.
And then if we're curious or have a question, want to have a direct conversation with the school leader, if we look back 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago historically, either board members from the school or school leaders would come before the board, and we had an opportunity to ask questions. There weren't, and I'll go back to 2 or 3 years ago, there typically weren't a lot of questions that were asked by the board because so much of it was covered through the evaluation process with the committees. I'm just curious, is there a formal time or process for us if we want to? You got it?
No, that's something, I'm being told something different completely.
Is there a time that we can officially ask a question, or if we have questions, should those be directed to you, or how do we?
So you're talking about during the application process,
yeah.
or in general about?
In general, if we're reading through an application and we're curious about something in the application or really, right, if we're as a board executing a contract with a group of folks and collectively have a question.
Yeah.
Are those people ever going to be in front of us?
Yeah, I think we could handle the recommendation meeting any way that you want to. So if we wanted to bring the people in, they're usually here. If we want to have a process for them to ask, for you to ask them questions directly, I think we could do that. I think it's more time consuming, and certainly we would filter and send any questions that you have through to them and try to get answers back from them, and I think they would oblige, and we could do that ahead of time, but we could also handle the meeting that way. We just hadn't done it for time's sake.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Pinkston?
Mr. Coverstone, seems like there's more elementary school applications this year than there have been in the past. Or have we reached a saturation point at middle school? What's causing the shift to elementary when traditionally these schools have started as middle schools?
I'm not sure. I know that there is. I mean, it would vary from applicant to applicant. I know there is discussion about, well, it's not that easy to start in the middle. Same reason we kind of went from the high school effort to the 5 through 12s. I mean, I think we're seeing, people who want to start even earlier and get the process moving so that they can, have the kind of training that they want for students before they arrive at the middle school. I think there's something to that, I wouldn't begin to put words in Randy's mouth about why they want to go to an elementary school there. I think that a lot of that's in the application. I think it's just a function of who's applying this time around as much as anything else. I think there are some reasons for that. The thought that we do have a number of middle schools that are open, and that thought that we want to start earlier, but I wouldn't overplay that.
Okay. I just had 2 other questions. The next one is I noticed looking at the profiles of the applicants that there are at least a couple of schools that are looking at what you described as South Nashville or Southeast Nashville. That, of course, is the area where the concentrations of our diversity, our international diversity is. So what are we communicating, if anything, to them, or what the operators, the applicants, or what should we communicate to them about, what we believe, I think, as a board and as a system, is our special obligation for making sure we're delivering really high-quality services to the youngest new Americans. Is that part of the conversation, and what kind of guidance are we giving them and expectations are we laying out for them?
Yeah, other than the general guidance which came with the diversity plan and our communications to them, and which will be a specific part of the interview process, our review teams also have experts from our English language learner department who are evaluating their plans and processes, and to the extent that they are not attentive to that, then it doesn't fit that area. It doesn't fit the needs that they're trying to serve in that area. So we're very attentive to that, and we'll continue to emphasize that going forward.
The only other question I had is relative to state law. We've had, over the last 8 months or so, fleeting talks inside and outside the boardroom about how we might articulate a more proactive set of messages to the field about what we expect from applicants versus what they expect from us. And among other things, I think what we've talked about is communicating about areas of the county where we've got capacity pressures, and and having them go into one area or another might help relieve capacity, for example, or areas obviously where we've got academic need. What does state law actually allow us to direct or encourage or wave people into certain areas under certain circumstances?
Well, state law does say that the standard by which we should determine whether or not to approve a charter is the best interest of the students, the community, and the district, which clearly, in my estimation, includes those exact issues. And since I've been in this office, we have tried to communicate to potential charter applicants and through our review process the needs that we have in regard to certain areas with regard to population needs, as you've identified, and/or academic challenges and needs that we have to bolster the quality of educational opportunities for students in certain areas. And I think that, by and large, the pattern of applications and approvals has followed that, and I think that's legitimate. I think the state law is sufficiently vague on what constitutes the best interests of the community, the students in the district, and who gets to decide that. And I think that's honestly what we've been continuing to have discussions with the legislature about.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question for you, Mr. Coverstone. You mentioned that there is a legislative appeal for the 5-year terms. Do you, to go to 5-year terms, do you have an anticipated timeline of when you'll get a result on that?
I misspoke. I think we should change the law to go to back to 5-year terms where we were, but that's not on the agenda. That would have to be done through the legislature. It's not been something that's been supported. We did work on that omnibus bill that made some substantial changes in mechanics of the law, and that was not one that received enough support. And I don't think it's a do or die thing. I mean, I think we're armed to deal with schools that are abusing that term. It's really about a school that wouldn't be renewed but isn't quite bad enough to close, kind of lingering on for 10 years, and we'll be all over them to try to make sure that they're not doing that.
Great. I think I had, another question that I have. I noticed 2 of the schools that submitted applications will open at capacity. And to my knowledge, we've never had that in this district before. So I guess if they're approved, that will be a learning experience for us. What do you anticipate? I know it's kind of a shot in the dark for you to even think about trying to figure this out because it's new, but what is the likelihood that they will be able to open at full capacity?
Well, there's 2 different scenarios. One of them is only 200 students, and it's a specialized population. And we have schools that open at 200 students with a couple of grades, and so that's not completely out of the picture. The question there is identifying the particularly specialized population, right?
So it's going to be based on location, I'm assuming.
Location, recruiting, outreach. It's proposed as a countywide school, how they get them there. So these are all questions that we'll dig deep into as we go through the application, and we'll be able to make a recommendation that we think this is likely, not likely, or otherwise before we, as part of our recommendation to you. With regard to the rocket ship, which is the larger, that's something they've done before, and so we'll be able to look at what their track record is, how they approach that. I know they do that because it's important to their financial model, but whether or not they can actually fill the seats and serve the students at a high capacity is what we're looking for in any application. We'll just be looking at it differently here, and we'll, try to make our best recommendation.
Okay, Dr. Brennan and then Ms. Shepherd. Go ahead.
Do you foresee a problem with 2 schools being named Thurgood Marshall? We have a middle school with that name, and so I would suggest that if they don't have a historical firm hold on that we suggest that they change their name if they make it through.
We have that issue on the list, definitely. That'll be an early question.
I do have one more question. Would it be possible for you to provide for us a schedule of the interviews that will happen on the 7th so that we'll know?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you
Okay,
send?
that would be great. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Dr. Register, any comments?
No.
Ms. Swan, Mr. Coverstone, you can wrap it up. Do we have any other comments from you guys?
That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic.
Appreciate your attendance.
I'm sorry, hold on just one second.
A quick one. When can we expect to hear, and maybe you've already answered this with the annual report, that annual report will look at, it's going to look at this, right, all of our folks this year. And if we want to make any decisions, which I don't relish the thought of making decisions over the summer about
No.
how much we're doing, but we've had one school, for example, that has been on probation for a long time. we never really took them off probation. They didn't do anything to come off probation automatically. They're still under this so-called probation that doesn't, it's a hard one to say that we've got a defined term for what probation is. So I'm just wondering how we use what's going to come, or when we may hear back from you, when we may have another, outside of approving new ones, actionable items around our existing portfolio of charters.
Right, so I'll answer that generally. This report is really a report that is the data from last October. And so the action we took in October and recommended, all of that was based on all that data. This is just our ability to get it together into a good performance report for you. However, when the data that comes from the TCAP and end-of-year testing that began today is processed by the end of the summer, we'll be in a position then to release that report in September for action items in October, and that's really when there will be an update on anything that would be actionable from any of the schools. So this is, and that's why I say, I think we could pull it together today if we didn't have the other things going on that we do right now. We simply just don't have the time to put the final touches on it. We have all the data. You've already seen all the data. It's already been acted upon for this year. We want to get that to you sooner rather than later, but we want to be on a regular cycle to do that in September so that we can make decisions in October so that families know what the future of their schools are during the choice cycle and right on down the line, and we're on track for that.
Really this time. Any other questions? No jokes. Ms. Frog?
There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.